Speaker.
I call Derek Paul.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise on behalf of New Zealand First to once again oppose this bill. We actually share the same sentiments as the Green Party insofar as we understand that this bill is designed to sort out some loopholes here, but it's about the ramifications and downstream effects of those loopholes that we're concerned about. And what's ultimately concerning as well is the fact that the National Party and the government is ignoring the fact that that those ramifications and downstream effects are actually having real effects on the people. And in this particular case, the clause that I'm talking about will affect the students in particular, sir. I've only been in this seat for about 6 months, sir, but this bill has surprised me on a number of levels. Firstly, the fact that first reading came through in 2011, and it's taken this long to get through to the third stage. But it actually, from the second reading, the committee stage, into the third, only took a couple of weeks. And not only that, but the SOPs that were put in were only very recent. And in fact, the SOPs that were put in were larger than the bill itself. And logic dictates that with such large SOPs that are affecting the bill, the original bill, it should have gone back to select committee, but it did not. And we heard on Tuesday as well, when this was being rushed through by the government, that the first speaker, which was the minister, took 45 seconds in the first speech. And that reeks to me, sir, of trying to push this bill through very quickly, with little or no fuss, and with total ignorance to the effects downstream. And that's what New Zealand First cares about, and that's why we are opposing this bill. What also is surprising, sir, to me, and interesting, is the fact that Labour is supporting this bill too. And in fact, every speech that they have when they stand up, they are saying the exact same thing as New Zealand First on that same clause, but they are deciding to support this bill. We have got submissions from the New Zealand Students Association who are opposing this bill. And that is very surprising to me that Labour wants to support it. However, like I said, sir, we agree that legislation does need to have the loopholes tightened. That's the intent of this bill. But if we're looking at the student allowance and accommodation clause, there are real concerns from New Zealand First. And the Minister, for her, the first speech she gave in the second reading, and every other speech since from the backbenches of the National Party, have been using the word equitable. And being equitable is definitely a matter of perspective. So I've got an analogy that I want to use here, sir, for the benefit of the National Party. If we've got 100 people in the deep Pacific, right in the middle of the Pacific, who are keeping their heads above water, and only a few of them have life jackets, it would be equitable for all of those 100 if we took those life jackets away from the few. That would be equitable. But is that the right thing to do? Is that fair? And what we're doing at the moment, what the government is doing at the moment, is proposing, and it looks like it will go through, to take away the life jackets of our students who are just keeping their heads above water, trying to survive and trying to get the basic necessities in life.
That's right.
And that's why New Zealand First is not happy with the effects downstream. That's why we're not going to support this bill. I'd like to remind the House that there were only 2 submissions. Both of them were against the specific clause I'm talking about. And these are the words of those students who are keeping their heads above water. This is a submission from the NZUSA. And might I remind the House that they represent 14 universities and polytechnics, including Auckland, Massey and Otago. And the very first sentence that they have in their submission, in their general statement, the NZUSA is opposed to the changes proposed to students' access to accommodation costs, support in the Social Security Amendment Bill. That's the very first sentence that they have. They go on to say that these days students' rents are high and rising.
That's right.
Student employment is much scarcer, and particularly in the larger cities where many tertiary institutions are situated. This submission was put forward in 2011. You can imagine what it is now. The NZUSA rejects the assertion in the regulatory impact statement that implies that students are not low to middle income earners, where in fact they are. And this is the most disappointing part of the submission that the NZUSA put forward. It is disappointing to note the Ministry of Social Development undertook no consultation with either students or student representatives and advocates when exploring this proposal. This appears to be driven by cost-saving measures rather than a genuine concern for quality engagement with stakeholders or in upholding the principles of consistency and fairness. So the government's standing up there with all this rhetoric about equitability and fairness for all students. And here are the students themselves, the ones that are getting affected by the legislation that they're putting through, saying that it is not equitable, it is not fair. They are getting the raw deal. And bringing this into real terms, sir, this article in the Herald, which was dated just this Monday, 30th of March, renters are paying up to $60 more a week. This is in Auckland. Areas of Auckland up 13%. Some areas are up 10% for a two-bedroom house, paying $531 a week. And across the city, across the Auckland city, it's growing on an average of between 3% and 6%. And people are finding it harder to get homes. The next option is to look somewhere else to rent. So what this article is saying, sir, is that especially in Auckland, where we've got one of the largest universities, we're making it harder for students to afford. And here's the kicker. We've got the NZUSA put out a poster on April the 1st, and it states, on April 1st, students receive a 90-cent increase to their weekly loan or allowance payment. 90 cents. Where the average rents are skyrocketing in Auckland by over $8, in Hamilton by over $3, in Wellington by over $11, and elsewhere by similar figures. So where is the fairness in that? Where is the equitability in that? And where is the brighter future for these students that this government has promised them for the last 6 or 7 years? Bringing it specifically to the bill, sir, I want to look at the regulatory impact statement. And in Part B, it states in paragraph 38, the government provides assistance for full-time students through allowances and loans. Underpinning the design of this assistance is the fact that returns from tertiary education accrue to both the individual and the nation. So the allowance that they're currently getting already accommodates for the accommodation supplement and allowance. But what this is pointing out is that, first of all, rents are skyrocketing, but they're only getting a 90-cent increase per week for their accommodation allowance. So where is the fair share from the government? This legislation is changing the ability for these students to be able to afford to study and to better their futures. And lastly, what I'd like to say, sir, is that there's nothing wrong with expecting students to work part-time and supplement their allowances and their income to work their way through university. I had to do it, and a lot of people in here had to do it, and a lot of students are doing it currently. But New Zealand First considers students to be the future of our country. We need to ensure we invest in our students and not see them as an expense. They are quite literally low-income earners. They need to be given the most support possible, not ensure they get the least amount available. And that is why New Zealand First opposes this bill.